Do our children find themselves under increasing pressure in the footballing world? Is the unrealistic ambition to reach the Premier League driving them out of the beautiful game? Do they find themselves having to compete and train to such an extent that they no longer enjoy football? Are teams now so competitive that players just do not get enough time on the pitch? All of these questions and more will be discussed in this week's episode by me, Andy Glover, and my regular co-host Mark Grinter. And we are joined by a guest expert to answer the question, is there too much pressure in the world of grassroots youth football? And perhaps, most importantly of all, what happened to our original theme tune? Good evening everyone, I'm Andy Glover and I'm joined as usual by Mark. Hello Mark.
Good evening, how are you?
Okay. We are also joined tonight by a member of Fight Club JFC with his own experiences in youth football, and in a moment I will hand over to him to introduce himself properly, but for now we have James Linden. Hello James.
Hi Andy.
Now James has a vast knowledge of the world of grassroots football, and so I'll hand over to him to introduce himself properly and just give us a brief overview of his experience. So if I can come to James.
Thanks Andy. So I've been coaching grassroots football as long as I've been a parent in grassroots football really. So my son Theo, who you know quite well because his first experience of football was with you guys when he was aged about 3 or 4 something. Quite a long time ago. He's 17 now, so over 10 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, he came down to Fries. I brought him along because we just moved to Keynsham, and he enjoyed that. We moved away from Fries not long after because we moved to a house that bordered on Keynsham Town, so another local grassroots club. Just from pure convenience perspective, that was right on our door, so we would walk over, and he had some friends from his class that went. So at that point, I kind of got involved with the coaching of that team pretty much straight away just to help out, as most dads or a lot of parents will, want to get involved. And I say dads, it usually is because they want to kick a ball around and what have you. But and from there, I kind of got into the coaching journey, started doing my coaching badges, supported by Keynsham Town, and I could go into detail, but my middle son then got into football as well, and between the two of them I ended up coaching a couple of teams at Keynsham, as well as being involved with the county team, Bath and Wiltshire boys. And from there I just kind of got the bug really, and ended up going down the rabbit hole of all of the FA kind of coaching, but really much wider than that, and just trying to learn as much as I could, so that initially just to be the best grassroots parent I could be, but the whole thing spiraled really from there. And once you got into the county team, was a level sort of additional to the grassroots kind of scene, and then my sons both joined Bristol Rovers not long after that, I guess, as academy players, and then it was very much sort of I carried on coaching, but I was sort of seeing it from a third lens as an academy parent as well. So, and today I'm now really enjoying coaching with Mark here at Fries, coaching our daughters, and there's another lens, seeing it through a parent for the third time, but now it's girls football and right back to the youngest age groups and grassroots. So I've kind of come full circle for the third time, and going through it all over again and absolutely loving it, but I've seen a lot over the years.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, you took Theo, but I'm not bitter. You took my best player. That's absolutely fine. In case anyone can hear any background noises, tonight we are actually recording in Somerdale Pavilion, which is the club of where we actually play. So first of all, talk about some sponsorship. If anyone is interested in sponsoring the podcast, then you can get in contact with us by email on greengrassroots@gmail.com. You're also able to go via the club website, www.fightclubjfc.co.uk, through the Facebook page, Fight Club Junior FC, or contact us on Twitter @FightClubJFC. So I'd like to start by looking at a poll that I came across, which examines some of the main reasons children get disengaged and leave football. Key indicators were: it's too competitive, there's too much emphasis on winning, too much pressure to perform, children are afraid to make mistakes, a perceived lack of competence, there's not enough individual playing time, it's no longer fun, and they're not interested in football anymore thanks to other interests. So the question which has long consumed the FA is how to arrest this decline in numbers and retain that level of interest and enthusiasm. One we covered last episode was the Silent Support Weekend initiative. Now, Mark and I discussed this from an unacceptable behaviour point of view, which you can listen to in the previous podcast. However, the origins of this weekend is actually to alleviate pressure on the children playing. To quote the FA, the aim is to reduce pressure on youth players at grassroots level and give them a better opportunity and environment to find their own voice, improve their on-pitch communication skills, develop their own game, and most importantly, have fun. Across the National Silent Support Weekend, we're encouraging coaches and spectators to show their support by applauding good play from both teams, but refraining from talking or shouting. This is to create an enjoyable, safe, and developmental experience for all youth players, so they can play the game with freedom, without pressure, and without an overemphasis on winning at all costs. So, without pressure, what do we think about the Silent Support Weekend?
Without the pressure, without the parents and the coaches shouting, was beneficial. My own feeling for the kids at a younger age group, it still didn't work because they still need a bit of.
But we're talking about the pressure, not the unacceptable behaviour, not the coaching side, the purely pressure side. What does it work from that side? So they're not having any pressure on them or anything at all. It's just go out there, play, learn their own way,
which is good, and I think could potentially it is good for them. For certain individuals, it is fantastic. For probably 80-90% of you kids that play football, if that's what they want, and a lot of the pressure comes from the coaches, comes from the parents, and they're half the time, certainly I'd imagine up to I think under 10s, under 11s, half of them would come off the pitch and say, "What was the score?" So they haven't got a Scooby Doo. They don't know if they've won. I think we had some when we lost. I think one game about 10-0, and they thought they'd won. They didn't have a clue. So it is that pressure that is put on. So that in that aspect is a good thing, and it is all about them learning and developing at a certain age.
Yeah, I would agree completely, and the pressure bit is really interesting because if you've ever done anything where somebody is telling you what to do, you'll know inherently that they're just making it harder. If you're in the minute trying to perform, then a good example is I was giving Theo a driving lesson earlier, and I kept telling him to go more gently on the clutch, and the more I told him to go more gently on the clutch, the more he froze, and he stalled the car about 3 times when he hasn't before. So that's what happens on a football pitch when we are constantly telling the players what to do. And you might not even be shouting, you might just be giving verbal commentary. But I think the big thing about it is not just that it's more enjoyable for the kids to not have somebody telling them what to do, they will actually learn to make decisions for themselves quicker and more effectively than if you have a joystick coach or a joystick parent telling them what to do. And I think that's the big thing. It's not just the pressure, but actually to make them effectively better, or to make them better more effectively, it's better to be quiet and to let them make decisions. You can talk to them before the game, at half time and after, but whilst they're trying to perform, people need space to just go ahead and play and do it. And if they make a mistake because they haven't spotted that they've not marked up, or then that's for a reflection after the game. Practice the following week and correct it again without direction, without pressure, and for us to find ways as coaches to kind of help them, but when they're performing, when they're playing, just give them the freedom to get on with it.
Can there be an age limit on this? Because at a certain point, they are now too competitive. They don't want this. They just want to win. At some
Yeah.
point, 5, 6, 7, 8, they just want they want to learn. They're just happy to go out there and learn, make their own mistakes. Under 15s that we are at, if we said go out there, we're not going to give you direction, they lost, and they felt it's because they weren't getting the direction. They'd be gutted and mad at the weekend.
So is the question: does winning become more important at a particular time, or does having direction and coaching that is more immediate become more important as they get older? I would say yes, it does. So the older they get, for sure, results might be a factor in getting the best out of your players. But again, I'll give a good example. So AFC Wimbledon's academy, under 18s level, so these are the boys preparing to get pro contracts, introduced something a couple of years ago where they actually let they have no coach weekend. So for the weekend of a match day, and this is a competitive league in a Cat 2 academy for boys trying to become professionals, they let the boys lead absolutely everything from the prep the weekend, the night before, to sorting the travel and getting to the game. I think a coach goes, but they literally will do nothing from the minute the boys are kind of set off. The boys will set up their own warm-up, they'll set up their tactics, they'll manage the in-game substitutions as well. So I think they still have leadership within that. They'll nominate the captain or a couple of players, and then they'll debrief after. So that's an example, and AFC Wimbledon is a very good academy, and they are truly sticking to that mantra. They don't do it every week, by the way. They know the value in having people who can make players who can make decisions under pressure for themselves or collectively as a group, because on the pitch the only people that can actually do that are the players, really, rather than the coaches. But I do agree that as you get older, certainly talking your way, and offering advice to players is more valuable. But I would say, I think you're talking about 14, 15 before it becomes important.
But it's interesting, you raise academies there, because you're talking about the elite level players, even at youth football. And is it because they are wanting them to learn by their own mistakes, or is it because they're actually looking for the leaders on the pitch?
I think they're looking they're looking for the boys who can handle pressure and respond in the minute and in the moment. But I think they also have, I've heard the coaches talking about it, and they recognise the fact that there's research and their experience tells them that actually just the barrage of information during a game actually doesn't help. And you could go up again another level, and these are boys who are open to hearing, or players that are open to hearing advice because they want to make a career out of it. If you're talking about grassroots teams, then you might as well take that way back down the scale. But you can even look at like the top professional teams, and there's definitely professional football players out there who respond better when coaches aren't constantly harassing them, and the level of kind of pressure that comes from the touchline from coaches varies. So like you think about Jose Mourinho when he was at Man United, absolutely berating Luke Shaw all the way through a game from minute 0 to the last minute, and the more he did it, the worse Luke Shaw played. A couple of years later, Luke Shaw's now the England left back and is one of Man United's best players, I would say. So because managers have given it a step back, other players might need it, but I just think children, it's an absolute no-brainer. We've got to give them space.
It's funny actually, because we mentioned that, didn't I, a game that I had where the manager was sent off, and for the last 20 minutes they put us under massive pressure. We hung on for the game after the manager had been sent off. But going on to academies now, there is pressure there for the children because parents want their children to make it, and academies are out there saying, oh, players come through us and they go to these clubs and so on and so forth. What effect can that have on the children?
I mean, as I said, I haven't had any overly experience on that. But I mean, I just had one lad who had a trial at Bristol Rovers, and again, the pressure he had under that thing, and you do get a lot of parents, even now with the girls' football, who you think if they have a few decent games, they're going to be the next Lionesses. So it's unrealistic pressures are being put on by parents generally, thinking, well, the next step, we're in the grassroots team, it'll only be a matter of time before a City or Rovers in Bristol will come looking for them and sign them up to their academy. Once it gets up to that academy, and I think James has obviously got, with 2 lads going through, a lot more experience than I have. But there is an unrealistic pressure on Grassroots, especially if we've got half-decent players that they think they will go. I'm sure we'll get onto it later. Then you are now getting these non-academies who sort of pretend that they're academies as the next stepping stone.
We'll come on to that one in a bit, yes.
So, and then there's that added pressure there. But for the kids, most of them all think they're going to be the next Ronaldo, Messi, Jill Scott, whoever it is.
So the statistic that is always out there, and I won't even remember what it is, but it doesn't. You don't have to have it exactly right. But the percentage of players that become pros was less than, I think it's 0.1. It's less than 0.1. So it's under 0.1% of the number of children participating in football, and the number that make it professional is so minuscule, really, that if you think about the damage you can do to your relationship or your child's experience growing up through putting that pressure on, and yet it's really hard to. We've all probably done it. I've definitely, talked out of line and overly, been overly pressurising on my kids over the years without intending to, and knowing full well all of this stuff about why you shouldn't, because it's such an emotive sport and it's such a part of the fabric of our society, I guess, and people get really. It's the same way that you see people abusing referees that wouldn't normally behave like that, but I think football can kind of almost just distort people's logic sometimes, and so rightly or wrongly, I think you'll get people who wouldn't normally even consider themselves to be overly pushy as parents or coaches, but in the heat of the moment and when they're on that training pitch, they will just lose themselves almost. And I think if you step back and watch yourself from a distance, most of us would probably go, "What am I doing there? Why am I berating an 8-year-old because he hasn't, played one-touch football or whatever it might be?"
Yeah, I think we said with football now, my daughter's also doing swimming, and it's the same when you get to that top end. She's now doing galas and you hear what's going on in swimming as well, where there's fat shaming, where they certain ages, and they've got to do this ridiculous amount of time, amount of effort that they put in, and it consumes lives. And I think again, it's just specialising with football. I think with football, when they get to the academies and stuff like that, they're training 3 or 4 nights a week, and
it's a huge.
Takes over their childhood.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely can do. You can attack it in one of 2 ways. You can either say that it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to play football, whether it's grassroots or academy or whatever, and especially if you're a parent and as a parent coach, let's face it, 90% of the coaches in grassroots are parents as well. Then if you look at that as a privilege, that you're going to spend loads of time with your kids and hopefully really develop them and be involved in there, but you maintain it as part of their childhood and you keep the perspective on everything, it can be a really amazing thing. But equally, if you're treating it as, my child, if the impression your child gets is, I have to become a professional football player or my parents aren't going to love me anymore and value me, which, to a child's brain, if they are being shouted at and they come away and haven't had a good game, for example, that might be, quite often, like you said at the beginning, one of the reasons why kids quit the game is probably because of that pressure. I think you'd get to the end of it, and as a parent, you'd really regret that, I think. So but it's just an education piece and something about perspective and trying to take it. Grassroots football is not professional football. It's not the Champions League. Academy football isn't professional football. It's not. It's just another version of child football, of children playing sports and growing. And you have to remember that. And it can be quite punishing. But I think that's why the education is really important, and the weekends that the FA do are really important. And they should. I think we should do more of them.
But it can also have damaging effect, academies. And I'll give 2 examples from my own history. Those who know me know I've run teams through before. My first team, I think we were about under 12s at this time, and we were in the 2nd division, and we were playing against Bitton. And after the game, the manager come to me and said, "I've got a player. He was with me all along, but he's been released now by Bristol Rovers, and he's come back to me." And he's lost all his confidence. So much so, he's no longer good enough to get in my team. Bitter were in the first division. It was a cup game. Bitter were in the first division. He's no longer good enough to get in my team, but I think he'd do well in your team. And of course, I was like, oh, that's fine. I don't mind. We're happy to take players. So he came to me, and in the first couple of months, he struggled even in my team. Dropping from academy to back to his first division, down to a second division, he struggled. And it took a lot of work with him, just sort of reinforcing that he's a good player, he's fine, getting back, we put him right back, which is where he played. And by the end of the season, he was sort of playing okay. Under 13 season, he sort of made a change, put him into midfield, and he started playing well and better and better and better. And by the under 15 season, we were back by then, we were in the first division, and we're knocking this team out of the cup and everything. And they're like, can we have him back? And we're like, no, he's our player. But his confidence had been knocked so much by just being released by the club he loved as a boy, that he'd gone from being good enough to go into academy to having to go down to a second division club. Just because he lost so much confidence. It took us over a year to get him back to that level of being he's that good. Yeah. And then another example, this was my second team. We'd gone up through the divisions again, and we were second division, gone up to the first division. So we're in the first division now, it's under 15s. And I've got a squad capable of winning that league. And we're 5 games in, we're unbeaten. And I'm not having to go up with the Rovers here, but it was them again. It tends to be Rovers tend to take players from here for some reason. Took my striker. I had 2 strikers. One had scored 65 goals the season before, one had scored 62, which is why we were so good. They took the striker, one of my strikers, away. He went with them for the season, and about 8 games at the end of the season, they released him again. And that was it. Now, the effect on him, he took it quite okay, I think, and he didn't come back to us because I think some of the players at our team were like, well, you left, that was it, we don't want you back. But the effect on the team was, I went from a team with 2 60-plus strikers capable of winning that league, to we ended up 6th, I think. And it was the effect on the rest of the players on the team, taking a player who they didn't even have for a whole season. Yeah. It was like, oh, we'll have a look at you. Yeah, come on in, we'll have. And they didn't really ever want him. It was just like, oh, you look pretty good. We'll have a look, But it was the other 15 players who were just absolutely hit and demoralised for a player they didn't really want. It was just they needed another player to fill the squad. And now, finally, one more. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast. I've got a friend who works up at academy in and around the Stoke region. And his team under 8s were playing against the Liverpool Academy, and they put 2 teams out, and in the first game they lost 6-0, and then they play again, same team, but they won 4-1. And he said the difference was they took their one player off, and that was it, one player that Liverpool took off. And people like myself, I've worked for academies before. I've done scouting for them years ago. That academies each year have got one player. They only focus on one player to get through. The rest are just there to make the numbers, to give that rest of that one player a team to play in. So at the end of it, all those players are told, "Thank you very much, goodbye." So you got the pressure of getting in there, all that hard work you put in, and at the end of it, you're told, "See ya." And a lot of those kids at 17, 18 just give up football completely.
So I don't disagree with some of that, but I don't also think it's as black and white as that. So I think it might be one player, it might be none. Like, I go back to that statistic. So I look at a lot of academy. I watch probably 5 academy matches a week, or 2 to 5 a week, depending on how many times the boys play. And sometimes you see players, and you'll be like, there isn't a professional football player on the pitch. You can tell, and that's just that might be the intake. Sometimes you see 2 or 3 lads who look really good. The clubs, they have got pressure just to turn out products from their academy. So that's the reality of it. That's if they don't produce players, they they'll lose their funding. But I don't think I've not seen anything in my experience that says that they coach players differently within that environment. And so I think when you get a kid go up to an academy, it is on you as a family to understand the not the risks you're taking, but to understand the likelihood of what you're embarking on, and then you set your kind of the context of how you're going to approach it within that. Like I said, I don't think either of my children will be professional football players, not long term anyway, put it that way, because there's another massive drop off from players who get a contract at the end of their 18s year. After 1 year, another massive chunk, let's say 80% don't get a second year. So you've got a statistic that says very few go to a professional, very few again go beyond 1 year, and so every time you're cut at that stage, you might be dropped from the academy at under 8, under 14, under 18, or you might be a first year pro and then you don't get a second year pro contract. But we've got to educate families and the players on the realities, and then have these sort of plan Bs and everything else that you can think of. So certainly with Theo at the moment, he's a first year scholar. He's really focused on his education, which Rovers are putting him through, and he's doing really well. He knows that it's not going to be a likely, pro contract at the end of it. You look at the statistics of his peers in the years above him, and they gave out one last year, but that's a player who hasn't really been anywhere near the first team much. He's had a little bit of involvement. Joey Barton's come out publicly and said, I'm not interested in playing academy players, for example. So the pressure on him is such that he just has to go, and he's just buying grizzled kind of pros from the Merseyside area, basically. So it's all about how difficult it is. But if you reframe it slightly and say, well, take everything you can out of playing at whatever level it is, so that if you are deemed, because football's just a game of opinions, basically. So it might not be that you're a worse player than someone else, but you just might not be the flavour of the coach who's making the decision. And so you always understand that you're never as bad as somebody tells you in football. Equally, you're never as good as people might tell you as well. So you've always got to keep that balance. And then you can, whatever comes, you take the best out of it. So, I think a lot of academy lads, they might get dropped. There are good places to go and play at the next level down. There's the education route is really good, so it will open a lot of doors for you to be able to go and study in America on a scholarship, or travel, Australia and bits of Europe. So that's kind of how I sort of sit there with Theo, and I say, look, if you don't get a pro contract at the end of these 2 years, and I'm not telling him I don't think he's good enough, I'm trying to really support him, but we see the reality. So you've got to have the expectation that there's, have a plan B. I think it's difficult. Maybe if you've got, and we do see loads of kids get released, and what you do to build up their confidence is one of the reasons grassroots football exists.
Yeah, but you're somebody who's been in the game a long time, and you know this. How many parents of an 8-year-old kid who's thinking, I want my boy's going to play for Manchester United, push,
Yeah.
know this?
Yeah,
they just don't.
The clubs will peddle a dream that make it sound more realistic. I think it's a little bit out of control. And like I said, I mean, you look at the vast wealth that's in football, and you can't blame some families for seeing it as a way to success and to wealth and to validation for their children, or for them as well. Ego is quite a big thing, I think. When you look at parents who are obsessed with their children winning, it's not about their children wanting to win, it's about the ego of the parent. My child's better than your child, or whatever, or my child's successful. You've got to try and, you're right, it does happen. My worry is the kind of the race to the bottom with academies now, and that they're scouting kids as young as 3 and 4, and it's not even 8 anymore. So how do you know whether a 3-year-old kid who's only probably been walking for about 12 months is going to be a professional football player? I don't know, but it's food for thought.
Now, talking of academies, we then have the other academies. Those who say, yes, we're an academy, come on in, just buy this, pay for that. Now, an academy because you don't pay for anything. And yet, these people come along, they say, we're an academy. Yes, join us. We're an academy. We'll get you here. We'll get you there. And I had a quick look online. In the Bristol area alone, there's at least 6, just in the Bristol area, offering coaching and pathways into football and pathways into professional academy coaching. This, I mean, and again, the pressure on the children is because now you're training again 2-3 nights a week for what you think is a way into professional football. Mark?
It's not. Well, my son did it for a year at a local club, and it was. You can look at it as it's a money cow for them. I think at the time when Bradley did it, he was under 9s, under 10. So I think it was under 9s when he went for that season.
Yeah.
So even back then, so that's 6-7 years ago, it was £30 a month we were paying for him to get there. And was the coaching any better than we got at Fry's? Yeah. Debatable, potentially. You had more children who were at a certain level who wanted to play football. I think sometimes at Grassroots you get a mixture of the lads and girls now who want to play football, and some who just want to come and mess about. So I think when you do go to those, not academies, but academies, whatever they want to call themselves.
I think they're technically called development centres, aren't they? So you'd call it a development centre. That's what they should be advertising themselves as.
They're not.
Yeah.
Go on the website. They are not.
Yeah, that's so. You know, you're talking about the teams that play in the JPL, and that's deliberately misleading in itself. So to call it the Junior Premier League, you know, I think is that entity is poorly marketed. I think. But I think, the coaching quality in some of these places isn't great. On the flip side, it is very good in some. So there is some good coach. There's some really good coaches out in some of the development centres. It's like anything, isn't it? If you're sending your child somewhere, it's on you as a parent to do your due diligence and check whether you're sending them. You know, I know nothing about gymnastics, and my daughter wanted to do gymnastics a couple of years ago, so we had to go around and ask people, what's a good gymnastics school? I wouldn't have a clue what I was looking at, but I would smell a rat if a gym said, I'm going to make your child the next Olympic gymnast, and you know, kind of would be a bit cynical about that, I think, but some people aren't. But the main thing that you said there, Mark, that really I think is a plus side to these things is that the standard that the children are playing in is high, so that will naturally set a challenge for them. But totally agree, Andy, that a lot of the positioning and the marketing and the cost that comes with it is painful, and there's a lot of travelling as well. So to play in a JPL, you might be travelling on a Saturday, as you know, from Bristol well beyond Birmingham and further north, and sometimes those games can be like 12-13-0. So you're like, is there a lot of benefit has come out of those? And there's you do get a bit of a tension between them and the Grassroots team, and I think that the purpose of them is supposed to run alongside a Grassroots team. Actually, I think it can be quite interfering with players who are trying to be part of both, because they play on a Saturday and on a Sunday. So they are mixed in their value. I wouldn't say they're all bad, but I would 100% agree. Approach with caution would be my advice. Find the development centre that's got a good reputation and is going to give your kid attention and develop your child, and isn't just taking the money, because they'll probably have one or two that they're looking to get into academies as well.
Well, we have a bad experience with one, because the player went to this development centre, and then next thing we know, he's leaving our club to sign on a Sunday for the team run by the assistant manager of the development centre. We were shocked. Funnily enough, we weren't.
Yeah, I mean, and that particular manager took other teams' players.
Yeah.
But where they have got where with parents and children who potentially want to go down the route, I would think the development centres, if say there's a squad of 13, 14, you would think 3 or 4, from what I can gather, follow on will end up going to a Bristol Rovers, a Bristol City, a Forest Green. They seem to have a higher percentage of those children that do make that next step up. So, I think there is a place for them, as long as they work, like I said, work with the Grassroots club. I said a lot of the times, it does feel as if they work against the grassroots clubs.
So I'd give a shout out here I mentioned it earlier, but so our boys didn't go down the development centre route because they were lucky enough to play for the school FA county team. So Bath and Wiltshire boys was you had to trial and get in, but it's part of the FA's kind of banner of county teams basically. So schoolboy football, and it's diminishing, as from what I can understand, is a lot of the county teams have folded over the years, but it used to be a really sort of established and quite a prestigious thing, and you would play for the county, and there was no cost. The coaching was world class basically. So it was coached by people who were former head of Bristol City Academy, who's gone on to coaching at Dortmund and Stuttgart, and through playing for this county team, the boys played the likes of Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, Juventus, Chelsea, Everton, and gave good accounts of themselves. And that was an amazing opportunity that I wish we had more of, because there wasn't the financial thing. As much of the focus in that programme was as developing the kids off the pitch as it was on. So it was a huge focus on values. The 4 values were respect, resilience, curiosity, and compassion. And a lot of what you did in that programme was about going out and doing off-pitch things like fundraising or volunteering, travel. So I think Theo was 6 when he went to Belgium with that group without us. So it was at 7. So he'd done a 4-day foreign trip without parents at the age of 7, and came back like massively enriched basically through that. You won't get that in a development centre. The focus will be on football and then getting someone into an academy solely. So that's the sort of downside to them. I totally agree. But there's always a tension. The kind of the pinching of players thing is not exclusive to development centres or academies. I think the skullduggery in football is just
deep,
rife, isn't it? And it drives me up the wall. But
that's probably one for another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. A whole episode I think you could do on the backstabbing in kids football.
Okay, so what about competition for young children in terms of when they play? Like the FA prohibit competitive football until you're under 7, and yet the number of posts I see, under 6s team looking for matches, under 6 team looking for matches, it's phenomenal. Are they starting too early? Is under 7s too early to play competitive matches? Even not even should they be just training still by under 7s? But the under 6s, they should just be training, and yet we see them out there advertising for matches.
I've seen under 5s.
What, matches?
Yeah.
Well, according to I know it came out a number of years ago, because we were playing, and we were told you cannot play games, and yet I think it's not being reinforced every year, because nobody seems to know this now, and yet it is still part of the FA regulations. You do not play games until you're under 7s.
They do, and it's simple as that. And as I said, I think with the girls now and the boys, and you go, this is our first game. You turn up as an under 8 girls or we've been playing for 2 years, and hello, and that there are. Probably they shouldn't be, but again, you look at how football is at this age. No, it shouldn't. It should just be training. And with the girls, you've got the Wildcats thing from I think 4 to 11-year-olds. So you could almost have a state up to 11 is really in theory, it's non-competitive. I'm sure we can go into it.
That definition is difficult, isn't it? I think playing a game of football can happen at any age, because I used to play with my mates, and no one organised them, but they were games when we were like 6, 7, whatever. It becomes competitive if a coach treats it like a competitive game, so that shouldn't happen, and until kids are a bit older. Organised, and how organised it is, it has an impact on that. So if it says it's a friendly game of football, but he's there with making them do hard drilled workouts, and he's giving them an absolute dressing down at the end of it, then obviously it's not friendly in the mind of the coach. Personally, I think playing games, whether it's 7 or 8 or 9, it's grey area. Some kids are ready, but that's the age at which kids are coming to football for the first time. So it's a bit hit and miss whether you're going to get anything out of a game of football for your team, because you might play a game against a team whose girls have just rocked up for the first time the week before. You might win 12-0. You've got probably very little. Your players, I should say, have probably got very little out of that game. The other team have probably got very little out of that game. So you may have been better off having a training match between your own players, and just having an in-house 7-a-side match. You're looking for the right level of challenge and the right level of ability mixes in a game, and that's why it's such a lottery, because we're trying to bring as many girls into the game as we can. It makes it difficult, doesn't it? You might even have had a team under 12 and you might bring 4 new players in, and that's almost like taking you a step back in terms of how ready you are to perform in a match. So I don't know if there's an exact answer to the right age. I think the stuff about the FA trying to review the formats is interesting, and the formats are constantly getting smaller for the ages, which I think is good, and that's all based on research about number of touches and the size of the area that you're playing in. So I think small games with fewer people for longer is good, and I totally believe in that. And so I think when coaching, we'll always try to avoid doing a training game on a full-size pitch, because I want to encourage more touches of the ball in tighter spaces for the girls to develop quicker reactions and just to have more time on the ball and not be stood on the flanks. It goes back to remembering being a 8 or 9 year old like you guys, probably on an 11-a-side men's football pitch,
getting lost,
just waiting for half an hour for the ball to come out to the left wing, and then you get one shot and you miss, and then so you wait for another half an hour. So I don't know. But calling it competitive is not massively helpful for the younger ages.
I said you just had, obviously, with your new team, you went to a tournament at under 7s girls, and you were up against teams that had been playing regularly.
Yes.
Eventually, in a couple of years, who's going to be the better off? That's the argument's sake, is under pressure those girls are under because they've won everything, because they've been playing 2 years against a team that's not played. Obviously, the gap will narrow, and that pressure that those... It's difficult. I think I'm with James.
I think we're almost in that boat, aren't we, with our girls?
Yeah.
To an extent. We got a group together very early, and we're already now starting to see the teams that started later than us are catching up, and that's naturally what happens.
It's that balance. I mean, and getting older, more than so now you're getting to the under 7s upwards, certainly in Bristol, and now with the girls, the under 8s, it's non-competitive. They say it's non-competitive. It's no results are shown and stuff like that, and yet under 7s for the boys and under 8s for the girls, and we're going through it now with the under 9 girls. We're in a cup competition. Well, by definition, it's competitive.
Yes, but the league allow one cup competition for the under 7s and under 8s. I think it's 2 for the 9s.
Two for the under 8s.
2 for the under 8s.
And the under 7s now. An autumn cup and a spring cup.
Okay, and then 2 for the older, then 3 for the older again. They allow a certain number of sort of competitive.
But does that... Is it the fact that it's a cup competition that brings any change in the way the players perceive it, or is it the way coaches frame that to the players before a game? If you go out and go, it's a cup competition, we've got to go out and win it, well, obviously they're going to feel under stress. You don't even have to tell them, do you? I think you just go out and play the game. I might be too cynical and grizzled and been around too long, but I don't care. I don't care if our under 9s win a game or lose a game. I don't care, and I want them to win, but honestly, for the duration of the game, before, middle, and after the game, I don't want them to know I care at all. I only want them to know that I care about them doing their best and playing well and learning something from it.
And I think with Grassroots, one of the main things, and I think for our boys, and it's a life skill. In life, you win, lose, and draw. It goes evenly for you, and that's an important lesson for them as well. It is about the win and lose. It's not all win, win, win. Life's not like that as well.
Losing a game of football isn't actually losing it. It's learning, isn't it? Yeah. So you win or you learn in a game of football, and just go, okay, it's quite useful to say I've lost against a particular team, Why don't we use that to set ourselves a target, and we'll play them again next year and see if we can close the gap a little bit. There's so many factors that affect the result of a game. They're out of the control of the players and out of the control of you as a coach. So it might be a bad refereeing decision. It might be that a load of your players are ill. It could be any number of things. So to actually put too much stock on it at this age is just bizarre. No one's getting fired. No one will remember you if you roll out the trophy that you won at under nines as a coach. So
you say it's a life skill.
Yeah.
So why not then advertise the results, let them know they've won, they've lost? I mean, I was reading somewhere that in Spain they play competitive games from under 6 onwards. They advertise the results, and it doesn't seem to have harmed them having won the World Cup and 2 Euros recently.
But again, how many do you lose?
Is it our responsibility as adults to educate children on how to win and lose gracefully?
I think it is, in a degree. I mean, unfortunately, if it's being advertised, if you're playing for a team that's losing 20-0 every week, at the younger ages it's not so bad. I can guarantee once they get to secondary school, they'll have the mickey taken out of them. And we've not seen that. So again, I think if you're in and you're losing 20-0 and that's being advertised, there will be certain parents that say, well, I don't want my child associated with that club or that team, and we'll move them away and stuff like that. So,
but surely that is on the league, and I think we could do a whole podcast on the deficiencies of some leagues we enter, where clearly after 2 weeks that team are in the wrong league because they've entered and players have left, and it's like, can we move down? No, sorry, you can't.
Yeah, so we could go into great depths about the administration of the local leagues. You're right, because if your team's losing 20-0 every week, you're playing at the wrong level. There will be somewhere where you can play a game of football where the result will be closer. You might still lose every game, and if that's the case, you probably look at it and go, you're probably providing football to kids who have not been given a chance to play football anywhere else. So why don't you frame what you're doing in positively from that respect? Because that's the other thing. There are kids out there who just aren't very sporty. They're not very athletic, and if there isn't somewhere that allows them to still go and participate, then they fall out of the sport altogether. Yeah. And that's something I think we owe everybody a chance to play. And they might not mind as much as you think. It might get a mickey taken out of them, but I think you have to publish the results, because, like you said, losing a game is part of life, and actually you can't shield people from that forever. We have to introduce them to dealing with setbacks.
But I think, like I said, I think the responsibility must fall on the leagues to intervene earlier. And I'll take an example from our team. We, I think, were close to folding as under 11s as we were put into a division correctly. And then a week before the start of the season, we lost arguably our best player. A week into that season, we lost arguably our next most creative player, and we spent the next 10-12 weeks losing by 5, 6, 7 goals. And we got to one game, I think it was Almondsbury, and we turned up with the bare 11, and luckily it was a very strong bare 11, and I heard that 3 of them, their parents had just managed to get them there. And as it turned out, we changed formations and did all sorts of things, and actually we drew with them, and it was a really good game, and that was kind of a bit of a turning point. But what the league should have done is, I'd actually said, we're in the wrong division, and it was like, no, you're too late.
Yeah, we've got, within the girls section at Fries, we've got one team that has been in the top division for 2 years. I don't think they've won a game, and most games they're losing 10, and we're still 2 years in trying to get them to go out of this top division.
Well, that's putting pressure on the girls.
Well, they're close to folding.
Yeah.
They've had enough. They don't want to, it's all right maybe in the spring and so, but in December, January, right, okay, we're away to whoever's a 45-minute drive there, 45-minute drive back. We're going to lose 10-0 plus.
Yeah, very hard to motivate.
What's the point in going there?
It's unfair pressure on the girls. It's also unfair pressure on the parents, who then got to deal with the fallout of upset children, all because leagues are not doing their jobs properly.
And the coaches that are volunteers, work full time, that are getting messages from parents like this. We've done this now for 18 months. We're sacrificing our weekends. And they blame the coaches. And we've, as a club, we have asked the league for almost 2 years. They need to go down. They've told us, and there's no guarantee that they will look into it for next season. I mean, I'm 99% hopefully that they will go down, but it might be too late. They might have gone. They are like that. And at the moment, they've got, it's 9-a-side. They've probably got 9 to 10 girls, which isn't enough to go into a new season, so we need to recruit. And if we don't, there'll be 9 to 10 girls. And at the moment, the FA and all the things about bringing girls on to play football, that potentially who want to play football won't have a club. They won't have a team.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think the league systems for grassroots just hampers you doing what's best for kids, basically. I kind of get it, because you've got to have some integrity, I think, in some of the ways that you can't move players up and down, for example, willy-nilly, because you'll just have people abusing that sort of system. But yeah, everyone's experience is probably the same as probably people, if they listen to this, saying, yeah, I've felt it as well. So
if you can see from league results clearly happening, it needs to happen. Then the league needs to take a step in, because the pressure on those children as well.
And I get it from the league. When you speak to the league, they're all volunteers.
Oh yeah, it's a logistical nightmare, I think, running a football league. But
and if you set up games for 6-8, and one team says that we need to go down, and then they've got to be. I don't know how that. Whether then this is where you could then argue with the pro clubs and stuff that they need to get a bit more involved with this if they want to keep children involved.
Well, I think coaches can be. You've got to be open to thinking outside the box and doing what's right for your kids and arranging your own programme and games if you want. So we held off entering a Colts team at Keynsham Town into the league for ages because they weren't ready for even Div 5 or Div 6, whatever the bottom division was. So we just organised friendlies where we said, by the way, because an example would be that the league won't let you put on extra players, for example. Yeah. If your team is losing 10-0, simply let the team losing 10-0 put on 2 extra players to level out the challenge or whatever it is, if they've got subs on the bench. If you arrange a friendly, you can do that yourself. You can arrange a friendly football festival and invite 4 clubs that you know play the same ethos of football and have broadly a better challenge. You might have to work creatively to do that. You might have to say to 2 different clubs, can you release 6 of your developing players to form a team to play against my team of developing players, or we'll do like a football festival. But you should have the freedom to be a bit more creative as a football coach and a facilitator of football, so that you can kind of give the kids a decent experience and a decent sort of setting to do it. And the league's just really another very rigid.
They will fine you.
Oh yeah.
I think not the Bristol League, and this is when COVID was going on, how leagues can be rigid as well, is that they said to what you can't cancel a game. You had players injured and stuff, so they wouldn't let them cancel it, and so they played the game with 8 or 9, got absolutely battered, and they still got a fine because they didn't fill enough players
during COVID.
And it was just like
global pandemic. Can't put a team out. That's a fine.
That's a fine. So you put a team out, but you didn't have enough players. And then they still fined them. I mean,
unreal.
There has to be some sort of common sense and ground. I mean, the leagues again. Cancel games for left, right, and centre. You can't cancel DOV and stuff like this without getting written proof. I don't think they understand that everybody's working 9 till 5 and extra. Now you've got to go to schools so you can prove that the game needs to be cancelled and stuff like that. And it's too much. And it said, take away.
I think it just needs modernising, doesn't it? Yeah. The administration of grassroots football needs modernising. Maybe the FA could help out there a little bit. I think they tend to have a bit of a guidance sort of policy with the league sort of set up, and they haven't. I mean, it was the whole thing is you had to file your scores by paper, didn't you? Up until even a couple of years ago, you couldn't email or basic modern technology that would have made everyone's life easier. But
and again with say the girls, we got fined. I think it was about 200-300 over the because they've got this lovely app now. You put the thing, but it didn't register the whole thing, and you kept putting it in, put pen, and so we got the fines, and he said, well, we're doing it, but your thesis, we know the system's not working, we're still going to fine you because you've not done it properly. I mean, you would think, well, hang on a minute.
I think we've all felt the heavy-handed bureaucracy.
So going back to the original thing of the the girls being in the right league and playing right football, you said it is too rigid. There has to be some bit of fluidity in this and a bit of common sense. And we've gone to, again, the girls team that are struggling. We go to the opposition now. We say to begin with, like, you can have a 10-0 win. We put that as the score before we even play it, and hopefully we'll play some friendly so you can play more of your girls, and just to be a more competitive game. And you'll be surprised how many men. Nah, we're going to go with our strongest
because we think we can get more goals than that.
Yeah, even though the league has said what the league has, goal difference has nothing all the way through in girls football around here. It doesn't matter. Even at under 16s, under 18s, the goal difference is irrelevant. And yet the
I think you'll find that's a grassroots thing. That's not just girls.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
boys.
There's goal difference is not allowed to count.
Yeah, which is an excellent thing.
Yeah,
it is just.
Well, I mean, once you get past 7 or 8, the game is over. And
10. It's the mercy rule at 10.
But I would say that before you get to 10,
Yeah.
in the minds of the players, the game is gone, basically.
Yeah, but
and then the team that's winning 7 or 8-0 is getting very little return out of that game, if it's that easy for them. And the team that's losing that much as well has gone beyond what, you want to have a challenge for your players. You don't want to have trying to describe that the sweet spot diagram that basically says that if something's too easy, you're not getting anything out of it. If it's too hard, you're not getting out of it. But there's this little sweet spot around the middle, really, where you want to be uncomfortable but achievable, and that's how you should manage every game of football. And again, I sort of said earlier, I don't care if we win or lose. I don't really care what the league says either. I would always step into a game of football and say, this is getting nothing out of it, to the other managers. Fortunately, people's attitudes are, but coaches are brilliant. I'd love to win 13-0 every game, and then.
Hey, I must admit, that's why we've had it. I've had it both ways, where I've had been in a team where we've lost 28-1, and we've had it with the girls, I think, where we've won a game 20-0. And you're doing everything to stop, because I hate them. I think once it gets past 5, it's ridiculous.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I don't know if one of the listeners are aware, and the opposition managers are aware of the mercy rule, which is at 10-0, they have the right to say, that's it, game over.
Which is interesting, because you don't want to stop playing football either.
Again, it's game
well,
time.
you don't, but the children on the pitch.
That's why I don't want the children to not play football, because it could be 10-0 after 5 minutes, in which case you go, right, finish it. What about?
Do they want to stand?
Here's a shout. For every goal you score over a 5-0 gap, you have to take a player off, or the other player can put a player on. So if you go 6-0 up, the team losing 6-0 put an extra player on. If it goes back to 5,
we used to do that. When we were younger, we used to do that.
I've tried it 3 times this season with the girls. And every time, and I've been informed that they find it insulting that you said that we'll do that. Opposition managers have said, no, don't want to do it, and then spoken to them after. We find that offensive that you're asking us to.
Why don't you say it's not for your benefit? It's for my team's benefit. It's for my girls' benefit, because they're not getting anything out of this game. And then you take the pride out of it, because if they find it offensive, they're only finding it offensive to their ego.
I don't care how offensive you find it. You got kids on the pitch being demoralised. I don't care how offensive you find it.
Can you affect what the other team does?
I agree. You can't. Unfortunately, you can't. But I can remember our team. We've done that a number of times, and the teams used to take us up on it.
Yeah.
We'd get 3 or 4 up, and we say we're happy if you want to put another player on, and they used to do it, and it makes it a lot more competitive.
So another excellent thing I've seen done, which is perhaps less insulting to someone's ego, maybe, is and this is from the county team. They were brilliant at doing stuff like this. They just say, why don't we call the game here, if it's at 10-0 after 30 minutes, but we'll play the second half, we'll play the rest of the game, we'll mix the 2 teams together. And you'd be sort of amazed at how players love this. You go, right, you girls or boys, whatever the team is, we're going to take a mix of both, and they can do rock, paper, scissors, or however they want to pick the teams, or just like playground football. But you end up with your two teams completely mixed together. So you've got some strong and some weak playing alongside kids that don't know each other, so you get a real good social return out of it as well. And then they just start playing again, and then they're still playing football, and suddenly you've mixed all of these kids together, and they're starting to. So the abilities and the matching is the same. Obviously, if it's a league match, this is where all those ridiculously rigid rules prevent you from doing stuff like that. But I've seen some brilliant things where people have finished a game like that, and a game that was going nowhere because it was just so one-sided has suddenly become, it's really competitive. Kids have really enjoyed meeting some new kids from other teams. Kids have learned stuff by playing with other kids who they don't know.
I'm sure you can in a league match because most these days don't have referees. We don't have referees.
No.
Talk the other manager. You've won the game. I'll give you that. Have some more goals free of charge. Yeah. Let's do this.
Most you can, and I think the leagues, certainly at the young age, are far too rigid. I mean, I think within our under 9s, we've got 20, 21 girls that can play. I can only register 14. There's 7 then. I mean, we're lucky. We do find games for them. But you have, the league, now you can only register 14. And that, God. So they do have to be more flexible. And again, like you said, I think, James, is to have game time and playing competitive games, because nobody gets anything from a one-sided game. And you will lose girls, boys. Even parents will take them away. I mean, I've heard parents who played games and they've said after a couple of games, well, we know that child, football's not for you, and would go away. And the child at 7 hasn't had a say. The mum or dad has said, well, look at you, you're not good as X, Y, Z.
Again, how you position what you're doing, part of the reason is you might say, this team isn't here to go and win trophies or turn out any professional players. What's success for your team, you should define that really early, and clubs have philosophies and ethoses that they should stick to. Football for all is a common one. Certain clubs, not naming any names, play to win and poach players off other teams and stuff like that. Disclaimer, that was a long time ago, might have just been one coach, but if you set that out and say the main aim of our team is to have as many of these girls who've joined us at under 8 still playing when they're 16, 17 or 18, and that'll be success for us, then, and if they are, by the way, that's an amazing achievement, because like you said, there's all those factors that push kids away from the game, and it's not always pressure, and it's not always about coaches not being supportive or parents not being supportive. Sometimes it's just that adolescent thing where you're into boys, girls, going out.
Well, the very last one on the list is not as in football anymore. We lost a player to skateboarding, boxing. Yeah, so yeah. Exactly.
I'm just trying to think. In our team, who started at under 7s, who are playing now, 4.
I think it's 4, maybe 5.
4 or 5.
Play for us. There's still others playing for other teams
who've gone on. In most cases, they think they've gone on to better when. Potentially, but that's different. That's a different argument.
Some of them are still playing, but they're playing
yeah.
for us. I think 4, maybe 5.
So, like James said, I think with our team, the girls, if we've got 7 or 8, I think it's got to be around that number that are there at under 16s, is a success. That's a successful team. They might go and not win a trophy in that time. But if you stuck them through and you kept them through that period, I think that's a successful team. And I think there are teams, clubs, individuals that goes away from the essence that the winning and the potential that they see successful, professional careers or whatever, is the main driving force. And if you've got to be honest, at grassroots level, it shouldn't be. You want the main aim, as I look at it, as running the grassroots for the boys and the girls, is to give them choice of being a part of a team, which is vital when they grow older, and well-rounded individuals, like I said, that they can take defeats, victory, and it's being part of a group and social aspects. That's
teach them things like respect, compassion, all those types of things. Make them good people as well. There's so many things important about being part of a team sport that really far outweigh the results. But you can also coach a team brilliantly and not win anything, because you might have brought a team from the very bottom level of the capability of a sport and moved them forward more than a coach who just poaches the best players, does nothing to improve them, but then wins a load of stuff off the back of effectively just forming a dream team. So I think they have that measure in schools now, don't they? It's the UCAS, not the UCAS, the Ofsted stuff is about how far you've moved individual pupils forward from where they were, as a measure of how good the school is, rather than your absolute exam results, because you might have just inherited a load of intelligent kids. So
I think as a club, if we set that metric as ours, as in, can we keep the largest number of players from the beginning to the end, rather than how much we win and what we win, and we communicated that from the start. So if you come here, it's about keeping everyone together, it's not about winning, then I think we'd be a much more successful club, not on the pitch necessarily, but as a community.
Yeah. And for the children, community.
Fry's is a very successful club by that measure, because
Yes.
if you look at the amount of fundraising you do, if you look at the number of times you're in the local papers doing amazing work with hundreds of girls, the number of events, Mark, you guys have got 50 to 100 girls to a professional football match, for example, is incredible. So what you're doing for growing the participation in the sport is amazing. Very, very successful community grassroots football club, and arguably doing much better things than, say, a club that's only got one team, but they go and win the first division and a couple of trophies because they might have handpicked the right people to do that. So.
And I think that's key, isn't it? It's keeping it fun for everyone, which, fun enough, is on the list as one of the main reasons people quit, or children quit sport, is it's no longer fun. And I think on that note, we will call it a day. I'd like to thank James for his contribution. Mark, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, Andy. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Thank you, listeners, and hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, feel free to drop us a mention and like and subscribe. Drop us a message on the email, any thoughts, and also if you have any thoughts for future episodes. This is me, Andy, saying goodnight, and Mark, and James.
Cheers.
You've been listening to a We Haven't Got a Clue What We're Doing production, produced and edited by Andy Glover.